Okay, here we go. Another video. Let's see what this turns out to be, because I'm going to do this a little bit different. I just got this. I plugged everything in, but I haven't turned it on yet. Figured we would do that together. And I'm going to go through this from front to from start to finish. So in other words, once we turn it on, if there's anything that needs to be fixing, we'll go ahead and fix. But I'm also going to take it apart. I'm going to clean it, retrobright it. It's really yellow. So I'm going to go through basically all the steps that I go through when I receive these things. So that being said, let's get started. One thing I noticed with this, it came with the power supply, and the power supply has little holes in it. Not sure why, but we'll be taking the power supply apart and just seeing what's up inside it. Anyways, let's go ahead and turn this thing on and see what we've got. So the monitor is in RGB mode right now. So let's just first start with 80 column mode. Okay. And again, if this isn't working, the next step is us troubleshooting and fixing. So if it is working, then the next step is just us cleaning. So okay, nice. Okay, I'm not going to test all the keys, but it looks like they're all working for the most part. Yeah, nice. Okay, so 80 columns working just fine. So let's try 40 columns. Awesome. So this looks like it's working, which is no surprise. Let's do Commodore C64 mode. Nice. Okay. I could put in the diagnostic cartridge to test the sound chip and all that stuff. But I'm going to tear this whole thing apart anyway, so we'll just do that, when we wrap up. But I can hear just a little tiny buzzing, which is usually a good indicator that the sound chip is working. So, all right. So I think at this point, what we're going to do is go ahead and start taking this thing apart. And I'm not going to edit this video outside of maybe speeding things up a little bit for the sake of time. But again, we're going to go through this step by step, just like I normally do, instead of me breaking things up into little pieces of chapters or whatever. So what I usually do next, before I take the whole thing apart, I unplug everything obviously, is I clean it while it's like this, because it's just easier for me to clean while it's all intact. Let's get this video cable out. So this needs a little bit of cleaning, and like I said, it's the camera can maybe pick it up. It's really, really yellow, and when I show the before and after pictures, you'll see how yellow it was, because we're going to go and retrobright this thing. So first things first, let's go ahead and start cleaning. So I'm using Windex. Also do it on a cloth here. We're going to be taking the keys off, and like I said, we're going to be going through this whole thing. But before retrobrighting anything, you need this keyboard, or you need whether it's the keys or the case or whatever, you need it clean. Otherwise, the dirt's going to prevent retrobrighting in those specific areas, and you'll have blotching. What I've noticed on this, what I don't like, I don't know if the camera can pick this up, is that the keyboard has stress marks. They're not cracks, but they're just shadowy marks. I don't know how that's going to play out when we retrobright, but they're evident. I can see them at the right angle. I can see there's a few marks. Again, if I didn't know any better, I thought they were cracks, but they're not. At least they're not physical cracks, but they do look like stress marks. So that's a little unfortunate, because I think they'll probably show up a little bit more if I retrobright. But we'll see what happens. Okay, so there's a lot of marks that are still on here. So the trick I use is, let me pause this for a second. I'm going to use a little bit of steel wool. I can also use Barkeeper's Friend. Maybe I'll do that first. Steel wool, if you're not careful and you rub too hard, it'll start taking some of the texture off. So you have to be careful with that. Mr. Eraser will do the same thing. It'll take some of the texture off if you're not careful with that as well. So be careful when you're using Mr. Eraser. If you use that, I prefer steel wool over it because I have a little bit more control of it. But let me get Barkeeper's Friend and steel wool and see if we can get some of these tougher marks off. Be right back. Okay, I had to move the camera a little bit to get me out of this room. So anyways, so what I'm using here, the price tag's covering it up, is Barkeeper's Friend, but I'm using the liquid. So the powder is kind of like some people use baking soda and mix it with the Windex. So add some texture to get into the little nooks and crannies. The powdered form of Barkeeper's Friend is very similar to that. But I like to use the liquid. Works basically the same. So it helps keep scratching to a minimum. So that's what we're going to try first. I'm going to give you some different ways, some different things that I use. So and you don't want to rub too hard because, like I said, that'll take the texture off. And yeah, you can see there's no dirt or anything coming off as well. So that's a no-go for us right now. So the next is spreading a little bit more Windex on it and using a blue scouring pad. But again, you don't want to do it too hard. Same thing. It's not really making it much of a difference on it. Okay. So then that leaves our steel wool. These are all my go-tos. Some of folks might do different things, but this is just how I do it. Everybody's going to have their way. Again, I don't rub very hard, just on the surface, and you can see that's already come off. Just light strokes. So you can see how well that worked. That mark that I didn't get off with the Windex or Barkeeper's Friend, which Barkeeper's Friend is really good. It usually works a good portion of the time. But in this case, it was a little bit ingrained into the case. So, okay. So I'm just going to get just a little bit more with the steel wool here, little spots that I see, and then we'll keep going. Okay, that's how I deal with the keyboard. So now let's take this apart. Now, when I retrobright, just so you know, I leave the labels on. Some folks warn you, and they might have a point, to take the labels off because retrobrighting might, over brighten them or what have you. I've never had that issue. But there's nothing to say you can't be conservative and take the labels off. The reason I don't is, yeah, I can use a heat gun, heat it up, and start peeling the label off. But when I do that, they curl, and then it's a pain in the butt to put them back and keep them from curling. You have to try to uncurl them. Sometimes they'll kink. Double face tape may not be strong enough to deal with the curl, you know, and they'll just gradually pop up. So I just as soon leave it on because I haven't had any issues. Well, you'll see, you know, when I retrobright this, and I'm sure you've seen in my other videos, that I haven't had any issues with the labels getting all messed up. So I'm going to continue my practice there. If it ever does get messed up, you know, I just happen to have some spare labels, but I've never had to use them. So, all right. So we're going to take this apart so I can pop the keys off, take the keyboard out, take the case apart, and then we'll start retrobrighting. Now, some of these have Phillips screws and some of them have Torx screws. This one in particular on the bottom of the keyboard here has Phillips screws. So, easy peasy. Okay, and we got our little screw here that holds the keyboard ground. Okay, wow, this looks really nice and clean. We're just going to clean it just a tiny bit more, but I think we can assume that this was kept in really nice condition. Okay. Okay. Once you get that RF plug cleared from the case by having it come down a little bit, then you can kind of twist this off going counterclockwise. So, all right. So we're not going to do much with this. Everything seemed to work. So we're going to just kind of leave this alone. Okay, so that just leaves the case. Let's clean a little bit of the inside here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put the case top and bottom here under warm soapy water. Make sure it's totally clean before we retrobright it. All right. So the bottom of the case doesn't look like it's yellowed, but you know, again, weird thing is that it has these kind of stress marks on it. Not cracks, but it just looks like stress marks. So we're going to have to clean this up a little bit as well. I don't worry too much about the texture here with the steel wool because this is the bottom, you know, of the keyboard case. So you're not going to see it if some of the texture is compromised. All right. Next, let's take this keyboard off. And when you take this keyboard off, there's these little spacers here that are kind of like triangular. You don't want to lose those. when you take the keyboard off, also remember how this LED here goes into play, because there's a little tiny bracket below it, so just make a note of that. Okay. So in this case, this is just a little flat piece of plastic that goes there, that holds it up, that butts it up against the keyboard case. But in other models, there's actually a little plastic square plastic piece that holds the LED in place. So keep that in mind. And when you're pulling these keys, you want to make sure that you pull them vertically as much as possible, because if you bend them just a little bit, you'll break the stems, guaranteed. Also, the springs are very thin, so easy to lose. So when you pop these things, just watch for the spring, because sometimes the spring will pop up and go into the spring black hole where all the screws go that you drop on the floor that you can never find again. Also, when I pull these keys out vertically, I don't know if you noticed, but I kind of turn the key puller, so I'm only pulling it by the corners. This helps not trap the spring inside the key puller, which sometimes can be a pain in the ass to get out. And take your time, because these keys for the 128 are hard to find, and when you do find someone that's selling keys, they're going from anywhere from $10 to $15 a pop. That can get expensive if you start breaking stems and stuff. Okay, the reason I'm leaving the space bar and the return key is they have, I think the return key, it's been a while since I did one of these, has a metal spring inside, so you have to be real careful popping these out so you don't tear the little holders that hold the spring, hold the rod. It's a little rod that it has in there. So you can pop it out carefully and then take the rod out. Okay, well, didn't quite work out the way I wanted, but there are 3 springs on the keyboard here, 2 small ones that go into these little recesses, and the middle one. So you don't want to lose these springs, and you want to keep them separate, because those 2 little springs are important. Okay, so this is what I mean. I pulled this out too hard, and so these things popped out, which we can pop back in. That's not an issue. But the reason you want to be careful with it, though, and try not to pop them out, is sometimes it will crack. It'll crack right there where the rod goes in. So I try not to be this rough with them. Okay. So I'm going to leave that in. We're going to clean this keyboard, but I'm not going to take this keyboard apart. There's a whole bunch of screws underneath it. I'll show you once I get this done. If the keyboard was a complete mess, I might take it all apart and clean the PCB on it, but typically they're not. The keys and the stems keep dirt and everything from coming inside underneath. So we're just going to be real careful about just cleaning this nicely. The keyboard seemed to work fine when we were testing it, so I don't think that there's a need for us to open it. Okay, so what's next? Now that we've got this done here, we're going to put these keys in an ultrasonic cleaner so it cleans them really well. And then we'll see about retrobrighting. So let me get a plastic bag to put these in, and then we'll hit the ultrasonic cleaner. Okay, be right back. Okay, so I have the keys in this little bag. Basically, here's how I roll with this ultrasonic cleaner. I basically first fill the bag up with a little bit of mean green. Okay. And then I put some warm water in it. Okay. I'll show you what I'm doing here in a second. So then I put it in the ultrasonic cleaner here, and I fill the ultrasonic cleaner up to the appropriate line with the warm water. Okay, so I make sure that all the plastic pieces here are underwater. That's important. Okay. And then I turn the ultrasonic cleaner on for about 5 minutes. Actually, I'm going to turn this on for 7 minutes. Okay, so while that's going on, I'm going to cut the sound and I'll show you. Basically, I'm just going to wash, while this is happening, I'm just going to wash the cases, the top and the bottom of the case, and clean this keyboard up a little bit. Five, four, three, two, one, done. Okay, so the keys are done. So you want to be really careful about one thing once you take them out of here. You want to take this water out, or the mixture, but you want to also be careful and remember some of these had those little tabs inside them that that held onto the rods. So you want to make sure that none of those slip through the drain. See the little tabs in here? Okay, these are still nice and tight in there. So you want to put a strainer, you know, on here so you don't accidentally shoot a couple of those tabs that might have gotten loose during the ultrasonic cleaning down the drain. That would be catastrophic. So the other thing that I do is I'm going to reuse this mixture because it's not that dirty, and we're going to reuse this mixture after we retrobright the keys, because we're going to do an ultrasonic cleaning it one more time to get all of the peroxide, the film of peroxide off of this, off the plastic. So I'm going to go ahead and just pour some of this so I can use it again later. Okay. Should be good enough. Okay. So now I'm ready to take these keys and we're going to wash them so the film we're going to just throw them through a rinse so the film from the mean green comes off. And then they'll be ready for retrobrighting once we dry them. And I'm going to show you how I used to put the keys in on a 3D printed key holder for retrobrighting. I no longer do that. I'm going to show you what I consider a much simpler way, at least for me, to do it. So I use this strainer. I use this for my 3D printed resins that I put in here, so that way should be good enough. I'm making sure that none of those little white tabs are here before I let the water go. All right. So now that we have clean keys, I'm going to separate the gray ones. I don't retrobright the gray ones, and I'm going to show you how I started retrobrighting the keys. You might find it amusing, so stay tuned and let me get that set up. Okay, so this is how I retrobright the keys. I have this 3M tape. It's pretty strong. Doesn't really say what kind it is, but it's really strong tape. So what I do, and by the way, I put aluminum foil in this pan, not for the reflection of the light or anything like that, because the keys are going to be sitting flat on here. It's more for the ease of cleanup later. So, okay, so I mean, this tape is so sticky, even when you put this thing down, the sides of it stick like crazy to whatever you're putting it down on. Okay, that might be enough. We might need one more here on the bottom, but let's see how far we get with this. So this tape is so sticky that even when you put water on it, it's not going to let go of your keys. Okay, so let's go ahead and just wrap this up here. I had to make a small detour, but I'm back. So we're going to separate the gray pieces because, like I said, we don't retrobright the gray pieces. And they're nice and clean, so. Okay, so for the keys, we laid down some of this 3M tape, the sticky side up, so that way the keys will stick. And what I'm going to do is, it kind of got overcast today. I'm still going to put this outside, but we're going to use the paste on this. And if it gets more overcast or whatever, the nice thing is we can still bring it inside and put it in our aluminum foil lined box with a black light for 24 hours. But we're going to see if the sun comes out here and leave it out for a couple of hours and hope for the best. Let's see what happens. So I'm using Salon Care 40 cream. For the case, we use the liquid since we mix it with water. The case is just kind of too big. The thing with the cases, the reason I don't do this with the cases is if you don't have even strokes, or if this dries on the case, a little more in one area than another, and you didn't get to keep it moist, you're going to get splotches. Not so much on the keys, because hard to really mess up the keys, quite honestly. Anyways, so that's why we don't do the paste on the cases. So we'll just douse this in peroxide here. Make sure you don't get this on your hands. Should be wearing gloves. Because this tape is so sticky, I can brush this on without the keys moving. So that's a cool thing about this tape. Okay, so I think we got this covered pretty well. Okay, so now we're going to cover it with saran wrap, or in my case, polyvinyl. Again, I do this so much that I get this by the roll now. Okay, that should be good. So we'll put it outside, check on it in a few hours, and if it's still overcast and it's not reacting well, then we'll bring it inside and we'll just put it under black light. It'll just take longer. I like the sun because it takes a lot less time. Okay. All right, there we go. Okay, so this is what we're going to do with the case. I've taped some weights onto the bottom of the case. I put some plastic covering. You can use saran wrap. This will keep the water from evaporating out in the hot sun. Well, the hydrogen peroxide mixed with water. So yeah, so I'm going to put this case in here and fill this up with a mixture of around 75% peroxide, 25% hot water, just to get it started. And then I'll let the sun do the rest, and I'll keep it out there for a couple of hours. So stay tuned. Let's see what happens. Okay, so this is what we've got going on. You can see that the moisture is getting trapped pretty well. But again, there's no sun. Hopefully the clouds break and the sun kind of piles through today. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to just leave these out here for a while and check back on them in a couple of hours, though probably a little bit more, since, like I said, it's not that warm. It's not cold either, but these things do well on hot days with lots of sun. So, all right, stay tuned. Okay, so these are the keys after 2 hours out in the sun. And they're looking a heck of a lot brighter. By the way, in case you're wondering, the aluminum foil and the aluminum pan, the reason I use the aluminum pan and the aluminum foil is they trap the heat. This pan has been out in the sun and it's really, really warm. So heat is a catalyst for the peroxide. So it's just that the more heat there is, the more cautious you need to be and keep tabs on your the items that you're cooking, so to speak, because it'll dry up the peroxide very quickly. Yeah, so I think we can call this done. So I'm going to put these in the ultrasonic cleaner to get this peroxide off it, but it's looking pretty good. So that's what I'm going to do next here. This is part of the mixture that I used in the ultrasonic cleaner. So now we're going to unstick these keys and put them in a little baggie, give them a cleaning. Get this peroxide off. And we'll be in business. And then we'll take a look at the case, because I used 3 32-ounce bottles of peroxide along with water to just barely cover up the case. And I did that so I have enough peroxide still in there where I can do the bottom of the case in the same solution. So I could neutralize this by putting water in here as well, but either way, I'm still gonna have to take these keys out. Okay, that's the last of the keys. So I'm gonna fill this up with the rest of the mean green solution that we used earlier, put this back in the ultrasonic cleaner and get these things all cleaned up. And then I'll easily, you can see how this nicely works with the aluminum foil here. Toss this out. Okay, so here we are. We got everything going on the ultrasonic cleaner. Just got to turn this puppy on, and we're going to clean this. We're going to leave it in there for 7 minutes. Okay. So in the meantime, let's go swap out the case. I'll take out the top case that's in there in the solution now and put the bottom case in. I already got the bottom already taped up with a weight on it. So yeah, so stay tuned. Okay, let's see what we ended up here. Turned out that the sun came out after all, which is really good. And we're just gonna slip this out so we can get this case out really easy. The hydrogen peroxide is still working. You can see that it's still bubbling. So the water is very, very hot. So the sun did its job. I'm looking at this and it looks beautiful. So we're going to rinse this with cold water. But in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and put this one in there. Okay, there we go. We'll go ahead and cover this up. And we'll leave that one in there for a couple hours. That's the bottom of the case. But meantime, we're gonna take these weights off. Yeah, this turned out really nice. So let's go ahead and put this under cold running water and we'll be right back. Okay, so here's the top of the case. Didn't turn out bad at all. If I look at it at an angle, I can still see a little bit of those little stress marks here, but they're not that pronounced, so it will do. And as I said when we started, I don't take off the labels. And you can see the label didn't whiten. The label came out just the same as it was when it went in. I know some people like to be careful on the conservative side and take the labels off and all that, not knocking them at all. Everybody has their style. But in all the time, I've been doing this, and I've been doing this for years. I've never taken the label off when I retrobrighted. And you saw me put the bottom of the case in with the serial number label on it, so you'll see how that turns out. If anything, it'll just be cleaner. But it won't come unstuck, and it won't whiten. So I just continue to leave the labels on, because like I said, if I take them off, even with a heat gun, they tend to curl, and then it's a real pain in the ass to flatten them out or to put them back into a flat position without creasing them up or whatever. So I prefer just to do it this way. If by chance I ever have one time when it just, you know, happens to mess up the label, well, I have spares for that. But like I said, in all the years I've been doing it, that's the way it's come out. All right, so we got this top of the case done. The keys are just about finished in the ultrasonic cleaner. I gave the keyboard frame here a bit of a soft cloth to just take the residue dust off, you know. Looks very clean, looks very nice. So I think we're going to be ready for the keys. We're just going to give them some time to dry. So we're going to wait 2 hours for the bottom of the case, get that done, and let the keys dry. So tomorrow we'll start putting it all back together again. And yeah, we'll show you the before and after. So stay tuned. Okay, so let's take the keys out of the ultrasonic cleaner. And we'll give them one final rinse here. Again, just in case any of the white little plugs, those little white stems came out of some of the keys, I'm putting a plug on the sink. And I'm not going to take it off until I inspect the keys, make sure that everything's intact. I'm not going to bother saving this mean green solution this time around. So I'm going to go ahead and pour it all down the sink here. Okay. This is cold water. It'll neutralize whatever peroxide's still lingering, and it'll get rid of the mean green film from the keys as well. So the space bar, I don't know if you remember how yellow that was. Look at that. White, clean as a whistle. And off-white, I should say, because that's the way it should be. So I'm going to dump these on a towel here. And make sure that all the little stems, the white stems, these guys here, are still intact on the keys that are supposed to have them. And then I'll drain the water out. Okay, don't need these gloves anymore. Peroxide's been neutralized. All right, and I'm looking at these keys, and they all look pristine. All right, so that's how I do it. You've seen other videos. I think the change on this one is I use the tape instead of that 3D printed key holder, keycap holder. The other thing you want to keep in mind when you do this, dry them right away, because sometimes there is some peroxide residue still on them, and you leave it sit and you don't dry them right away, it will create a little spot on the keys. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to dry these, make sure the stems are all intact, and then we'll let them dry, and then we'll be back and we'll see about putting this all back together, show you the before and after bit. Purpose of the video, like I said, is going from start to finish, so you can see how I do it. A lot of trial and error along the way, and lots of different ways to do things. I mean, you don't have to, I like to use the sun because it's fast. I like to use an aluminum pan for it because it heats up and it keeps the heat inside. That pan was hot when I took it out of the sun, and that helps the peroxide. Yeah, so, all right, we'll be back. Okay, so we just got the bottom of our case out of the Retrobright solution. And yeah, so all the yellowing is gone. All the yellowing along the sides are gone. And it's a pretty good match to the top. So yeah, I think we got ourselves a winner here. So there you have it. So I'm going to go ahead and put this thing back together. Get the keys back on. This came out super sweet, really nice and clean. The keys, they're all dry now, and you know, super white, off-white, because that's what they are. But really nice. We don't Retrobright the gray keys, but we did clean them with the ultrasonic cleaner, and they came out super nice as well. So we'll get the keys popped back on here real quick, and then put it all back together and give it one last Diag test, and then that'll wrap it up. And you basically have seen exactly from start to finish how I go about restoring these things. Okay, we'll go through just a few seconds of putting some of these keys in. So the first thing that I like to do when I put these keycaps back on is get to the little more intricate ones, the ones with these little rods. Get that out of the way and go first. And then I usually just lay them out, you know, keyboard style. So they're just easy to just pick up and plop down. So let's start with this. So remember, we set aside when we started 3 springs for this. These 2 on each side and the one in the middle. So here are the ones for each side. And be careful, these are so hard to find if you drop them because they're really thin. And there's the one in the middle. So basically putting the rods in, and make sure the larger part of the face is the front. So putting this in, the rod goes up into these little slots, and it's pretty high up. So, you know, kind of have to be a little strategic about it. And you don't have to put the springs in right now. I mean, you know, just so you don't lose them in case something happens when you're putting this rod in, you can just put them aside for the time being. So I just kind of pull this side out just a little bit, and that will allow this to stretch itself in there. Okay, so the rod's in. Now we can put the springs, and make sure that when you put the space bar back, that you're lining up. There are these little protrusions underneath. Make sure they line up over the springs. So you kind of have to coerce this middle one, but the others have enough clearance to just get on there, and then pop the key, boom. Okay, so we do very similar to the other keys here. So the return key here is this guy, similar to the space bar. Okay, you can see the recesses in there, or the slots, I should say, in there where the rod's going to go. So just do one side first, and then there's the other side. And just make sure the spring goes in the middle. There's a little stem that sticks out, so the stem needs to be in the middle of the spring. Okay, and you can kind of hear it click. So there's the return key. Then we're going to do the same with the 0 key. All right, and be real careful with these. I mean, there's been occasions when I put them in upside down in my haste to get things done really quick. So, all right, then the rest is pretty simple. You know, you're basically just putting a spring in place, you know, and just dropping the key on it. Make sure the stem is in the middle of the spring. And you can kind of feel it kind of snap into place or hug into place. Okay, and there's certain keys. Let me put one more in here, and then I'll stop talking and just speed this up. Like the caps lock key that doesn't use a spring. Okay, the stem just goes in the, because it's a switch. Okay, all right, so I'll shut up and speed this up. Okay, it's always a nice feeling when you know you aren't missing any springs. These springs are so thin that sometimes they overlap, and you can easily get confused by accidentally putting 2 springs in instead of the one, because they're so thin. When they overlap, it's sometimes really hard to tell. So be cognizant of that. I've learned my lesson in the past, so I'm pretty careful now when I do this about paying attention to the spring. Okay, so there you go. Doesn't that look beautiful? A nice, clean, white, well, off-white keyboard. So let's get this on the, screw it back onto the case, and get the motherboard back on, and then we'll be good to go. Okay, so let's get the keyboard back onto this. Now I'm holding this LED because this is the LED that came out, and it's really weird because usually on the 128s I see a little square plastic LED spacer that goes here, but this one had this little flat piece of clear plastic. So I found that kind of odd. I hadn't seen that before. So anyways, so let me see if we can remember how to put this back in. So I'm assuming that this comes back like this, and this plastic must butt up against here, and it's pushing against the 3 wires there. It's the only thing I can think of, the only way this thing could be holding this in place. I'm assuming that's what happens, because I don't think the keyboard, I wish I could have remembered how I took this off, but I don't think this pushes up against that, does it? Maybe it does. Okay. So it looks like that's the way it goes. That's interesting. Very, very odd. Okay. Yeah. There you have it. All right, let's get this thing screwed back on here real quick. So, remember these little plastic doohickeys? They're angled, so the screw can just screw right in there. I don't want that LED to fall out of place. It's just weird. It's just precariously hanging on there. That's just an odd way to go about that. That LED is flush against here, so I guess that's just the way it goes. Okay. Like I said, this just seemed rather strange to me. Okay, so then let's put the rest of these screws in. All right. Doesn't that look pretty? Okay. We'll put this aside for now. Okay, let's get this back in play here. It was easier to put back on than it was to take out, that's for sure. Okay. You can see what I'm doing here. Ground wire. I just don't think that that long one belongs there. And I'm plugging the LED in. All right. That should do it. Yeah, that's better. All right. There you have it. Beautiful. So let's go run a quick diagnostic on it, make sure that it works. And then we can wrap this up. I do want to look at that power supply though. I was wondering why it had a couple of holes in it. So let's do that next, and then we can basically call this done. Okay. Before we do the Diag on the C128, I'm curious what these two holes are. I want to open this up and then measure the voltage on it. But before I plug it in, I want to make sure that There's nothing weird going on here. Okay. I don't see anything wildly weird about this. I don't see any burning, any burn marks, any scorching. So let's go ahead and just plug this in and measure the voltage. Okay, AC. We need 9 volts AC. Okay, that's going from the middle pin to the top left on this. Okay, that looks fine. And then we need 5 volts on the right 2 pins here. And we're getting 5 volts. So power supply seems good. So that's a huge plus. I like these Mitsumi power supplies. They I haven't had any bad experiences with any of them. They're pretty well put together. So let's put this thing back. I don't know what the holes were for. Maybe they mounted something, or maybe, I don't know. I don't want to even guess. So awesome. We'll clean this power supply up and a fuse. I don't recall seeing fuses on these, but okay, that's interesting. All right. Great. I'll clean this up, and I got one nice C128 power supply. It's interesting because here's one of my other power supplies, but this is a Commodore branded power supply. This is a Commodore branded power supply too, but it's a Mitsumi. So I don't know, you know, I don't know the difference in the years when maybe they switched, but this is I believe a much better power supply. I still didn't recall seeing the fuses on them, but I do have a couple in the boxes. But I always like this power supply. It's always seemed to be like one of the better ones. But the C128 power supplies, though, are usually pretty good. It's not like the old Commodore 64 power supplies that would fry your system. All right, so let's wrap this up. Keep our fingers crossed that we didn't break anything when we put all this back together. Turn our monitor on. Our power supply on. And let's go to town on it. And hopefully we can wrap up this video. I told you I was going to go through step by step everything that I go through from start to finish, and this is it. This is the culmination of it. Yes, love it. LED works, power works. Put it in 80 column mode. Yeah, helps if I change the monitor to RGB. There we go. Sweet. So let's run a quick Diag test on it. There we go. All right. So while that's going, in the end, you probably hear the SID chip, I hope. I'll show you the before pictures, but you saw what I go through. You know, that needed to, if there, something wasn't working, we would have fixed it before anything. You know, in about a few seconds, you're going to hear the SID hopefully, and, you know, we'll know that this thing is fully working. There we go. So, hope you got something out of my Retrobright techniques. Again, they've served me well over time. Sure, I've made mistakes in the past, but that's how I know what I like to do, and how I like to do it. Everybody has their way of doing it. I don't slam anybody for their way of doing it. Some are better than others, and I've learned from a lot of them. So there you have it. If you have any questions, just throw them in the comments, you know, but I think we can wrap this puppy up. Got a nice, beautiful new Commodore 128. I think I got a box for it somewhere too. Nice thing, it even came with the manual. How do you like that? An introductory guide. All right, well, like I always say, you only live once, life is short, enjoy every day like it's your last, you know, and hey, retro fix, man. Peace out.